That night, my father got right to the point. So, son, mission accomplished? He asked as he stepped into a mountain of fettuccine and whirled his fork around. I attacked my noodles. I attacked my noodles too and gave him a smile. Uh-huh, I said as I sat up tall to deliver the news. They're all chickens. The turning of his fork came to a grinding halt, and I could tell something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I tried to keep the smile plastered on my face as I said, "And what?" He rested his fork and stared at me. "Is that what she said? They're all chickens?" Not exactly." "Then exactly what did she say?" She didn't exactly say anything." "Meaning?" "Meaning I went over there and took a look for it myself. I tried very hard to sound like this was a major accomplishment, but he wasn't buying." "You didn't ask her?" "I didn't have to. Garrett knows a lot about chickens, and we went over there and found out for ourselves." Lunata came back from rinsing the Romano sauce of her 7.5 noodles, then reached for the salt and scowled at me, saying, "You're the chicken." "Lunata," my mother said, "be nice." Lunata stopped shaking the salt. "Mother, he spied. You get it? He went over there and looked over the fence. Are you saying you're okay with that?" My mom turned to me. "Bryce, is that true?" Everyone was staring at me now, and I felt like I had to save face. "What's the big deal? You told me to find out about her chickens, and I found out about her chickens." "Brawk-Brawk-Brawk," my sister whispered. My father still wasn't eating. "And what you found out," he said, like he was measuring every word, "was that they're all chickens." "Right," he sighed. He sighed. Then took that bite of noodles and chewed it for the longest time. It felt like I was thinking fast, but I couldn't figure out why. So I tried to bail out with, "And you guys can go ahead and eat those eggs, but there's no way I'm gonna touch them, so don't even ask." My mother's looking back and forth from my dad to me while she eats her salad, and I can tell she's waiting for him to address my adventure as a neighborhood operative. But since he's not saying anything, she clears her throat and says, "Why's that?" "Because I don't know how to say this nicely." "Just say it." My father snaps. "Well, there's excrement everywhere." "Oh, gross," my sister says, throwing down her fork. "You mean chicken droppings?" My mother asks. "Yeah, there's not even a lawn. It's all dirt and, chicken turds. The chickens work in it and peck through it and, oh, gross," Lunetta wails. "Well, it's true." Lunetta stands up and says, "You expect me to eat after this?" and stalks out of the room. "Lunetta, you have to eat something," my mother calls after her. "No, I don't," she shouts back. Then a second later, she sticks her head back into the dining room and says, "And don't expect me to eat any of those eggs either, mother." "Does the word salmonella mean anything to you?" Lunetta takes off down the hall, and my mother says, "Salmonella?" She turns to my father. Do you suppose they could have salmonella?" "I don't know, Patsy. I'm more concerned that our son is a coward." "A coward? Rick, please. Bryce is no such thing. He's a wonderful child who's afraid of a girl." "Dad, I'm not afraid of her. She just bugs me." "Why?" "You know why. She bugs you too. She's over the top about everything." "Bryce, I asked you to conquer your fear, but all you did was give in to it. If you were in love with her, that would be one thing. Love is something to be afraid of. But this is embarrassing. So she talks too much. So she's too enthused about every little thing. So what? Get in, get your question answered, and get out. Stand up to her. For crying out loud." "Rick," my mom was saying. "Rick, calm down." He did find out what you asked him to. No, he didn't. What do you mean? He tells me they're all chickens. Of course, they're all chickens. The question is, how many are hens and how many are roosters? I could almost hear the click in my brain. And man, I felt like a complete doofus. No wonder he was disgusted with me. I was an idiot. They were all chickens. Duh. Garrett acted like he was some expert on chickens, and he didn't know diddly squat. Why had I listened to him? But it was too late. My dad was convinced I was a coward, and to get me over it, he decided that what I should do was take the carton of eggs back to the baker's and tell them we didn't eat eggs, or that we were allergic to them, or something. Then my mom butts in with, "What are you teaching him here, Rick? None of that is true. If he returns them, shouldn't he tell them the truth?" "What? That you're afraid of salmonella poisoning? Me? Aren't you a little concerned too?" "Patsy, that's not the point. The point is I will not have a coward for a son. But teaching him to lie? Fine, then just throw them away. But from now on, I expect you to look that little tiger scare in the eye. You hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Okay then." I was off the hook for all of about 8 days. Then, their shoes again. At 7 in the morning, bouncing up and down on our porch with eggs in her hands. "Hi, Bryce, here you go." I try to look her scared in the eye and tell her, "No thanks," but she was so darned happy, and I wasn't really awake enough to tackle the tiger. She wound up pushing another carton into my hands, and I wound up ditching them in the kitchen trash before my father sat down to breakfast. This went on for 2 years. 2 years! And it got to a point where it was just part of my morning routine. I'd be on the lookout for Julie so I could whip the door open before she had the chance to knock or ring the bell. And then I'd bury the eggs in the trash before my dad showed up. Then came the day I blew it. Julie'd actually been making herself pretty scarce because it was around the time they'd taken the sycamore tree down. But suddenly one morning she was back on our doorstep, delivering eggs. I took them, as usual, and I went to chuck them, as usual. But the kitchen trash was so full that there wasn't any room for the carton. So I put it on top, picked up the trash, and beat it out the front door to empty everything into the garbage can outside. Well, guess who's just standing there like a statue on my porch? The egg chick. I about spilled the trash all over the porch. "What are you still doing here?" I asked her. I don't know. I was just thinking." "About what?" I was desperate. I needed a distraction. Some way around her with this garbage before she noticed what was sitting right there on top. She looked away like she was embarrassed. Julie Baker embarrassed? I didn't think it was possible. Whatever. The golden opportunity to whip a soggy magazine over the egg carton had presented itself. And buddy, I took it. Then I tried to make a fast break for the garbage can in the side yard, only she body blocked me. Seriously, she stepped right in my way and put her arms out like she's guarding the goal. She chased me and blocked me again. What happened? She wanted to know. Did they break? Perfect. Why hadn't I thought of that? "Yeah, Julie," I told her, "and I'm really sorry about that. But what I'm thinking is, please God, oh please God, let me make it to the garbage can." God must have been sleeping in. Julie tackled the trash and pulled out her precious little carton of eggs. And she could tell right off that they weren't broken. They weren't even cracked. She stood frozen with the eggs in her hands while I dumped the rest of the trash. "Why did you throw them out?" she asked. But her voice didn't sound like Julie Baker's voice. It was quiet and shaky. So I told her we were afraid of salmonella poisoning because her yard was a mess and that we were just trying to spare her feelings. I told it to her like we were right and she was wrong, but I felt like a jerk, a completely club-faced jerk. Then she tells me that a couple of neighbors have been buying eggs of her, buying them. And while I'm coming to grips with this incredible bit of news, she whips out her mental calculator. Do you realize I lost over $100 giving these eggs to you? Then she races across the street in a flood of tears. As much as I try to tell myself that I hadn't asked her for the eggs, I hadn't said we wanted them or needed them or liked them. The fact was, I had never seen Julie cry before. Not when she'd broken her arm in PE. Not when she'd been teased at school or ditched by her brothers. Not even when they'd cut down the sycamore tree. I'm pretty sure she cried then, but I didn't actually see it. To me, Julie Baker had always been too tough to cry. I went down to my room to pack my stuff for school, feeling like the biggest jerk to ever hit the planet. I'd been sneaking around throwing out eggs for over 2 years, avoiding her, avoiding my father. What did that make me? What hadn't I just stood up and said, no thanks, don't want them, don't need them, don't like them. Give them to the snake. Why don't you? Something. Was I really afraid of hurting her feelings? Or was I afraid of her?